Okay, so welcome to day 11 and our discussion of eggs and egg products. Eggs are one of the most important ingredients in all of baking and pastry. And they do things that no other ingredient does, so that's why it's listed as a separate ingredient group. As we look at all the ingredient groups for baking, we have sugars, we have fats, we have liquids, we have grains, and then we have eggs. Eggs are unique in that they are both a liquid when we're mixing them and they're a solid when we have them in a final baked product. So let's take a look at the concepts that we're going to be looking at in this chapter of the textbook. You'll see some of the first words listed here are proteins. Albumin and ovomucin are two proteins that are in egg whites especially. Lipoproteins are in the egg yolk primarily because they are a mixture of a lipid and a protein, so they're a fat and a protein together. Another term that we're going to be talking about quite a bit is lecithin, which is an emulsifier. Naturally occurs in eggs, and there's quite a bit of it in eggs. We'll also talk about other parts of the egg like the chalice, the egg shell, different grades of eggs and how eggs are judged based on their quality. Egg products that you can buy. There are eggs, of course, you can buy them fresh, but there are many different types of egg products that are available to us in the professional kitchen. And we'll talk about some of those and what their strengths and weaknesses are. Whole egg substitutes. There are egg substitutes for those who want to have something that doesn't have cholesterol in it. So you can find they're basically egg whites that have been colored, but we'll talk about those somewhat. And we're going to talk more about protein and how proteins denature, how they coagulate, the curdling of protein and how that can happen all of a sudden. And we'll also talk about some food safety as we wrap up this presentation. So let's look at the makeup of an egg. An egg has 6 distinct parts. There's the shell, the chalice, the thin egg white, the yolk, the thick egg white, and there's finally an air cell. And the air cell is in the egg primarily to allow for expansion and contraction with changes in temperature. Here's an egg cracked, and you can see the thin white, where the arrow goes to, is much thinner and has a very different amount of protein in it. The albumin that's in the egg white is thinner in this area, and then we have the thick egg white. You'll mostly just see thick and thin egg whites in this clear delineation when eggs are very fresh. So what are eggs made of? Mostly water, mostly moisture. They're basically, as a whole egg, when you include the yolk and the white together, they're about 76% moisture, which is about the same as the human body and is the same as basically a chicken. It does have protein in it, quite a bit of protein in fact, about 12% overall. There's about 10% fat in an egg, that's primarily in the yolk. And then there are other things like sugars and what they call ash or minerals. Generally, these are the eggs are very good for you. They're very rich in nutrients, but there is cholesterol in an egg, and that's something some people watch in their diets. So the components are unevenly distributed between the white and the yolk. If you see the chart here, you'll see that to address the questions at the bottom, which part of the egg is mostly moisture or mostly water? An egg white is 88% water, whereas an egg yolk is only 50% water. So balanced together, the average is 76% overall. The white has 10% protein, the yolk has 17% protein. The yolk actually has a lot of protein in it. And when it comes to fat, the white has no fat at all, and the yolk has 30% fat. And then, of course, when it comes to sugars and minerals, they vary just very slightly. So really, when it comes down to it, the two different parts of an egg have in many ways, two different roles to play. And we use them separately in many baked goods. Egg whites, also called egg albumin, it makes up about 2/3 of the part of an edible egg, contains an important mix of proteins vital to its functions. This protein basically helps to form structure and it helps to hold air. So that's how we're able to whip eggs and get an egg foam. Egg foams are very important to a lot of different things that we make. For example, an angel food cake is almost completely egg foam. The egg white does have thick and thin portions, thickened by ovomucin, a very large protein, and it thins as it ages. So as an egg is laid, it's very fresh, but then over time, over a course of about 3 weeks, it starts to break down and it starts to lose some of its strength. That's why, really the best eggs for whipping and the best eggs for use in baking and pastry, and for that matter for cooking, for breakfast cookery, is really the fresher the better. So as it dissolves, it doesn't have the ability to coagulate as well as it would when it's fresh. And what are we after with eggs most of the time? Is we want that coagulation. So as it's heated, it thickens and it turns into a solid. So the egg yolk makes up about the last third of an edible part of an egg, and the yolk proteins are called lipoproteins. These are proteins bound to fats, and it's an emulsion of lipoproteins and fat droplets suspended in liquid. It does age and changes as it gets older. It starts to thin out, and the membrane that holds the yolk, around the yolk, becomes weaker. That's why as eggs get older, they're very difficult to separate, because you'll find that the yolk will break much more easily when that protective membrane around the yolk has weakened. That said, going back to the emulsion part, egg yolks have a large amount of lecithin in them, and that's what helps keep those lipoproteins together. So it's about 10% lecithin by weight. And this lecithin we use for a lot of things. It helps emulsify water and oil together and helps hold them as an emulsion. So good examples that are like cake batter. When we make cake batter, a lot of times we're incorporating a lot of fat and a lot of liquid into a cake batter. How do we keep that from curdling? Well, one way is by using lecithin, by using egg yolks. A lot of the time when we're trying to make a cake batter, if we don't have enough egg yolk in there or enough of an emulsifier, then the batter will start to look curdled, and that won't bake correctly, and your cake will probably collapse. Another example is pâte à choux dough. When we make pâte à choux, we are making something with a large amount of fat and a large amount of water. How do you get those two to play nice together? We start working in eggs into the pâte à choux. Pâte à choux dough then is held together as a stable emulsion, and it stays that way until it's baked. Mayonnaise is another good example where we're getting large amount of fat to absorb into a small amount of liquid, and we're trying to get the two to play nice together. The egg yolks are what make that happen. In the picture here, you'll see that one on the left is an emulsion of fat and water, and the one on the right is fat and water separated. Normally, fat and water would separate. They would never mix. But with an emulsifier with some lecithin added, you can get the droplets of oil so small that they actually stay in suspension. And with lecithin, it actually stays that way over long term. Now, can you get an emulsion without lecithin? You can, but it won't last very long. It's very temporary. With lecithin or another emulsifier, you will find that the emulsion stays for much longer. They use this in a lot of salad dressings as well. Like a vinaigrette, we can make a temporary emulsion using water and oil, or vinegar and oil for that matter. But the thing is that it will separate. If you were to add some soy lecithin or some egg yolk, pasteurized egg yolk that is, you would end up with something that stays together. And a good example of that is where we have like a Caesar dressing where it holds together and it does not separate. So egg yolks, they do pick up flavor, color, and nutrients from the hen's feed, and you'll find that here in America, most of our egg yolks are yellow. But if you go over to Asia, I went over to Japan, and I found that the egg yolks there were a distinct orange. And it really has to do with what they feed the chickens. The pigments, the carotenoid pigments that are in the feed affect the color of the egg yolk. They still have the same nutritional value, and they generally will be just as good to eat. It's just that they have a different color. Sometimes they feed the chickens omega-3 fatty acids to help put more omega-3s into the egg yolks, thereby making them a little bit more healthy. The reality is, though, it doesn't change the cholesterol content of the egg yolks. The shell of an egg is hard, but it is porous, and it will pick up odors. If you have, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned in a previous presentation, having a bucket of diced onions next to a case of eggs. Eggs can suddenly take on that smell. Eggs are washed and sanitized before they're packed, so generally we don't have to wash them ourselves. But in the United States, we always consider all eggs to be a potentially hazardous food, so we always have to be careful with them. If you ever wonder about the eggshell color, that really depends on the breed of the hen. The hen lays eggs, that are, well, all birds lay eggs that have different colors, and you'll see different breeds of hens will have different colors. Sometimes the brown eggs, sometimes white, and in the case of wild birds, all kinds of different colors. The air pocket that's in an egg, it forms in the larger end, and it increases in size as the eggs age because the proteins start to shrink. This is, if you ever want to know how old an egg is, if you want to know if an egg is old, you can float it in water. If it floats, chances are that air pocket is fairly large, which means the egg is fairly old. And that also means it's going to be more difficult to separate the egg yolks from the egg whites. It also might mean it might not coagulate or whip as nicely as a fresher egg. The chalice is something most of us don't even notice, but it's a twisted white cord, and that anchors the yolk in the center of the egg. So in most all eggs, when you crack, you'll see this little white glob, and basically it's an extension of the membrane that goes around the egg yolk. You can strain them out if you need to, but basically they're perfectly safe to eat. Now, when we buy eggs for a commercial kitchen, we specify whether we want shell eggs or whether we want egg products. In the case of shell eggs, here in America, eggs are purchased in the shell, and that's how we refer to them. We could call them fresh, but that may not actually be a good word for them because they may not actually be fresh. They may actually be several weeks old. So we refer to them as shell eggs. We want them in the shell. If you don't want them in the shell, if you want them pre-cracked, there are many different types of products we can buy with pre-cracked eggs where the freshness has been classified by when they were cracked and the date that they're supposed to be used by. Now, egg size classifications vary quite a bit. You can buy, most common classifications are large, extra large, and jumbo. There are medium eggs. You can buy medium eggs if you specify those with your food company that you're buying from. But most of the time when you find eggs, they're large, extra large, or jumbo. But they also have mediums, they have small, and then they have peewee. And there are several different ways you can get those kinds of eggs, but most of the time, the most easy to get are these more standard sizes. Now, the grade classification is something that isn't really as important to us as bakers as it would be to, let's say, some of the cooks who are going to be preparing eggs for breakfast cookery. The grade classification does not reflect the safety or the nutritional quality, and US and Canadian grading systems are similar, but they're not exactly the same. Higher grade eggs have firmer whites and yolks, they have smaller air cells, they have an intact and prominent chalice, and they're uniformly shaped and colored shells. So the higher grade, the better looking the egg. So a grade AA, a grade A, and a grade B are generally the ones we're looking at most of the time when we're buying eggs. Obviously, grade B eggs would be lower cost, they'd be less expensive, but most of the time, most companies will carry either grade A or grade AA. Here's an example of how the eggs look when they are grade A. Now, grade AA is here at the top. They have a definite, prominent, thick white and a definite delineation between the thick and thin whites. They're great for poaching. They're great for preparing for breakfast. They're especially, eggs like this, grade double A are especially important to the cooks because an egg that's prepared for breakfast cookery has to look beautiful. It has to be a good looking egg. When we make things with baking, on the other hand, we're nearly always mixing them in with other ingredients, so appearance isn't nearly as important. What we really want is performance. We want the egg to be able to mix well, to emulsify well, to whip really well. That's what we're looking for. So we just need eggs to be fresh enough to do those things. So generally, eggs are graded as they're packed, and generally that occurs within a day or so of being laid. That's why there are chicken farms all over the country. However, that doesn't really mean much, except that they're generally packed shortly after being laid. And they're generally taken right to a market and they're available for sale. Now that can happen. You can go to the supermarket and buy eggs that might be even as much as 30 days old. So take a look at what the sell by or use by date is on the carton so that you'll have an idea of how fresh that egg is. The grade does not necessarily reflect the freshness of the egg. Eggs can be laid in various grades. You can find certain chickens that are just laying B grade eggs. The grade does decrease with age, however. So if you buy a grade A egg, over time, even under refrigeration, they'll drop from a grade A to a grade B in about 5 weeks. If it's improperly stored, so let's say you leave the eggs out at room temperature for a day, that can drop your grade level quite quickly. So I guess the short end of the short way of saying is, you buy eggs fresh, use them fresh, and only buy as many as you think you're going to use within a few days. Try to get them used up and buy new, and rotate your stock constantly so you're always using the freshest eggs you can possibly get. Now there are egg products, and this is really great for when you're preparing something with a lot of eggs. So if you're preparing, let's say, scrambled eggs for 1,000 people, you can buy egg products that are already cracked. You can see the first photograph here, liquid whole eggs with citric acid. They add a little citric acid in the eggs so that when they're cooked, if they get a little overcooked, they won't turn greenish and grayish, because as eggs start to cook a little bit longer than is ideal, they will start to change color. You can buy these eggs already cracked. They're pasteurized, which means you could eat them raw without any danger of salmonella or any sort of foodborne pathogen. The good thing is that it's easy. They call them easy eggs for a reason. You don't have to crack them, which means you can cook a lot of eggs in a short period of time with very little effort. They're also really handy when you're using a lot of eggs in the baking world, because sometimes we have a lot of eggs we're using, and cracking them can be rather slow and tedious. You can get shells in them, and this eliminates that problem. Also, egg products, the chalazé has been filtered out, so you don't have to worry about that. Now you can buy them refrigerated, frozen, or dried. You can buy whole eggs, you can buy egg whites alone or egg yolks alone. And they're used in just pound for pound, ounce for ounce, the same as you would for shell eggs in any recipe. So the big advantage is safety, of course. They've been pasteurized by law, so they are guaranteed to be free of salmonella bacteria. And they can be used in uncooked sorbets, icings, and so forth without the danger of getting anyone sick. So you have time saved, you have food safety. Also, it saves a lot of space. These pre-cracked eggs are in cartons that can easily be put on a shelf in a walk-in refrigerator. You don't have to worry about big giant boxes full of shell eggs. You also don't lose anything. You don't lose any product due to breakage. They have a longer shelf life. They can last for quite a long time, and even as long as 10 to 12 weeks in the refrigerator unopened. Once they're open, they need to be used up, but they can last quite a long time. And a lot of them come frozen, which means they can last for months. You don't have any leftover whites or yolks from separating shell eggs. The reality is that when we're making something with egg yolks, like a creme brulee, we're going to have all these leftover whites. What are we going to do with those whites? Unless we have a use for them, they're probably going to end up in the trash. So we don't end up with loss. We don't end up with waste. And you know they're always going to be the same. They're always uniform in quality. So you don't have to worry that you don't have to worry about finding a bloody egg, for example. That's not going to happen with pre-cracked eggs. You're also not going to have any problems with shells. You're going to have very consistent quality batch to batch. Now, I use frozen whites quite a bit. It can be used in most applications requiring egg whites including whipping. The great thing is that you can make meringues and so forth. You do want to check the package because some of the whipping agents that they add can have an effect on our Swiss meringues and our Italian meringues. But the thin and thin whites do separate out when freezing, so it's good if you are opening up a new package, shake it up really well to make sure the two get mixed together again. If you don't, what you'll end up having is all the thick white will come off the top, and what you'll end up with in the last third or so of the carton will be just a watery mixture at the bottom of the thin white. You can also buy egg yolks pre-cracked. The frozen ones are usually sugared, and that will help prevent ice crystals from causing damage to the eggs. But because they do have sugar in them, you have to make sure to account for that in your recipe. If your recipe just calls for straight egg yolks and you have some frozen sugared egg yolks, then you need to back off on some of the sugar in the recipe. Now, in our bakery, we use refrigerated egg yolks. Sometimes we'll have those available. They don't have added sweetener, and you don't want to freeze them. They're not really meant to be frozen. They're meant to be refrigerated, but they work really well. They work great for making creme brulee. They work well for making anything that we're going to be using egg yolks in. So creme anglaise, any of the custards, things like that. Frozen whole eggs can also be purchased. And sometimes these are sold as much as like 35 to 50 pound boxes with a plastic, sort of a flexible plastic bladder inside full of eggs. They will thicken somewhat when frozen, but the reality is that they work great for when you need a lot of eggs, and you just don't want to have to crack 35 pounds of eggs. There are egg substitutes, mostly made from egg whites. They're fat-free, cholesterol-free. Generally, they're just colored yellow by using beta-carotene, and they may contain some other optional ingredients that are just check the label for what's in them. But for baked goods, I would just use regular egg whites instead of a liquid whole egg substitute, since egg whites are just as easy to get a hold of and they're the real thing. There are dried eggs. We don't use them much, but they are still available. And dried yolks, sometimes add sugar. So they are also available, not oftentimes very, very widely used. And then dried egg whites. Dried egg whites is what we refer to as like a meringue powder, and it's oftentimes used to add stability to our egg white foams, to things like meringues. It can also be used to make royal icing, and royal icing is basically it's an egg-based flat icing that is very it's used a lot in decorated cookies, but it's also traditionally used in a lot of piped items on cakes. So what do eggs do? Eggs provide structure. Protein in the egg starts to coagulate when it's heated. And even though it's a liquid, when you mix it in, it turns into a solid once it's baked. And that's what makes eggs unique. Nothing else does that. People have come up with all kinds of egg substitutes and things like that, made with things like flax seeds and so forth. But if flax seeds don't coagulate, they have an egg-like texture when they're mixed with water, but the reality is that they will never coagulate. So you don't get the structure building with egg substitutes. What you do get with eggs is you get the real thing. You get real coagulation of protein, and that helps to provide structure, helps to hold things together. But it also, as we know, it does other things besides coagulating. It helps to hold air, so you can aerate and produce a stable foam. You can use it to emulsify. Egg yolks help keep oil and water from separating. Eggs are often added to creamed butter or shortening. This, when we are making cookies, for example, you'll cream your butter or shortening with sugar, and then you'll add eggs little by little. The eggs act as not only a stabilizer, but also your liquefier. It's a main liquid in a cookie recipe. and it plays an important role. All the bubbles that are created when you cream get filled with egg, and then those bubbles get stabilized when the egg cooks in the oven and starts to coagulate. Eggs do contribute flavor, and that's something that is a good part of that. They contribute color from their yellow-orange carotenoid pigments in their yolks. The big difference between a yellow cake and a white cake is really yolks. A white cake doesn't have yolks in it, and a yellow cake has the yolks in it. Proteins in white and yolk contribute to brown color for Maillard browning. And the reason why is because they have protein, and the protein bonds with the sugars. Sugars give you that deep browning that we are looking for in many baked products. Be careful though, aluminum bowls, beaters, and saucepans can discolor eggs and turn them a dull gray. And what's happening there is that the aluminum has an outer coating of aluminum oxide that will start to come off in your egg mixtures. I prefer to use glass or stainless steel when I'm working with eggs. And another thing that traditionally is used to beat egg whites is a copper bowl as well. Copper doesn't cause any problems with eggs, and but aluminum does. Eggs add nutritional value. They have lots of nutrition in them. They have protein, they have fats, they have good vitamins in them, minerals. Carotenoid pigments are antioxidants. So there's a lot of good things that are in eggs. And because they contain a lot of moisture and they bond with other things and help to form a good structure, they do a lot of other things as well. They help reduce the chance of staling because they help hold moisture in. They add shine. We use eggs as egg wash to create a shiny surface. They're used as an edible glue when we're making things like empanadas, or we're making let's say a petivier with puff pastry. We glue it shut with egg wash to make sure that it stays closed. It promotes smoothness in icings, confections, and frozen desserts. When you're using frozen items, it helps reduce the size of the ice crystals in ice cream. That makes ice cream smoother, has a more velvety feel. Eggs add moisture, and eggs increase softness in raw dough. So let's take a look at coagulation. Coagulation is kind of a mystery to a lot of people, and it occurs when proteins are heated. When you heat protein, you denature or unfold the proteins. Then, when they get warmer, they start to bond or aggregate and form clusters. Those clusters bond with other clusters, and before you know it, you have a large three-dimensional network of bonded protein. Coagulation also occurs with acid, salt, freezing, whipping, and drying. But you can see in the photograph here, going from just eggs cracked in a pan to adding a little bit of heat, a little bit more heat, and as time goes on, the coagulation gets more and more set. It will keep doing that. It'll keep coagulating until the heat stops. So this is a drawing of it. A raw egg protein is rather curled up. It starts to uncoil and denature. And then as denatured proteins start finding each other in a mixture, they will start to bond when they're heated. So it forms an extensive three-dimensional network of protein. And that's what makes eggs special. But as I say, that protein can start bonding very quickly and can sometimes get out of control. So we have to be careful about how we handle eggs. So the more eggs are heated, the more the egg proteins aggregate. So protein network becomes tighter, firmer, and more rigid. Eventually, if you go too far, the eggs curdle or overcoagulate. Custards can shrink and become rubbery. And what will happen is the water that's trapped in the egg will start to squeeze out because surrounding that water is protein. So if the protein is squeezing, it'll squeeze the water out just like squeezing a wet sponge. Baked goods start to shrink. They become tough and dry when they're overdone. So it's best to slow down that coagulation. The best way you can do that is to raise the temperature of coagulation. And we can do that through adding other ingredients. Eggs are rarely prepared in the baking world by themselves, so oftentimes they are usually in the presence of other things like sugar, salt, fats, liquids, flour, of course, lots of other different ingredients in there, and those all affect the coagulation. But the other thing we can do to control it is to lower our temperature. Just bring down the temperature and bring it up slowly. The slower you can coagulate the eggs, the more smooth and more consistent they'll be. So we can dilute eggs with liquids. So that will help to, for example, like a custard sauce coagulates properly at about 180 degrees, while undiluted eggs coagulate at about 160. So that difference makes for a smoother sauce. We can slow the rate of cooking, lower the oven temperature, use a water bath or double boiler. Do whatever it takes, or whatever the recipe calls for, to bring the temperature up slowly. If it does it slowly, you'll get a better result. You'll get a better feeling product in the mouth. It'll have a better texture, and you'll be happier with the product. You can use egg yolks rather than whites. The reason why this works is the fats and emulsifiers in egg yolk make it more difficult for the lipoproteins to coagulate, so they do come up slower and more smooth. It's just really the natural fats and emulsifiers help to do that. We can add sugar. The reason why this works is that it slows down the unfolding of egg proteins. We can add fats, oils, or emulsifiers. This interacts with egg proteins, interfering with their coagulation as well. And we can reduce the amount of acid. Acids, including lemon juice, cultured dairy products, and fruit, they will generally strengthen the protein, thereby making it more apt to coagulate a little more quickly. We can also add starch. The reason why this works is because the starch is absorbing water while the egg is trying to coagulate, and it's getting physically in the way. So when we make pastry cream, we are adding a starch, and it's thickened with eggs and starch. It's the only custard that we make where starch is added. But the thing is that it gets a nice smooth texture, even though it's brought up to the boiling point, which would normally cause most eggs to be curdled. Things that we have to be aware of, hard water and table salt will speed up and strengthen egg coagulation. So we just have to be aware that if we're in an area where it's hard water or we add table salt, it's going to speed up the process, and it could cause the eggs to become tough or rubbery. Dairy proteins interact with egg proteins, firming up custards. Now, that's a good thing because we want custards to firm, but we also want them to be controlled. So when we add dairy protein, what we end up doing a lot of the time is bringing it up very slowly in temperature. We usually will prepare a custard in the oven on a water bath. There are protease enzymes in raw pineapple and other tropical fruit, and this will break down egg protein, preventing them from coagulating. So if you're thinking about making, let's say, a passion fruit creme brulee, you want to make sure that the passion fruit has been, the protease enzymes in there have been eliminated. The way we can do that with tropical fruit is we bring the fruit up to the boiling point. So we bring it up to a simmer, and then we cool it down. That heating is hot enough to deactivate the enzymes. And of course, constant stirring, it really helps to make eggs helps make eggs soften more slowly and more evenly. So we'll find with most custards where we have to cook them slowly, we will either whip them or stir them constantly to make sure that the egg proteins are coagulating slowly and evenly. Now, when we whip eggs and make a foam, air bubbles are beaten into the liquid. You can only do this once with eggs. If you whip eggs, the proteins will start to grab onto air bubbles, and it will denature the proteins, and it'll start to form kind of a film around the air bubble and hold it in place. If you allow a meringue or an egg foam to collapse, if it does collapse, there's no re-whipping it. Once you've done it, the proteins have been exhausted and used up. So you have to do it right the first time. So a meringue is an egg white mixture whipped with sugar. And a meringue with sugar in it becomes much more much more flexible and much stronger. We use it for the air that's in it, so we'll fold in meringue into a mousse, for example. We'll fold it into souffle. Angel food cake is made primarily with meringue, and sponge cakes are too. Certain icings call for meringue, and then they're baked into macaroons, cake layers, things like dacquoise, which is primarily made of egg foam, and tartlet shells. Stable meringue is firm and flexible. It holds up to folding, it holds up to piping. It can be spread around with a spatula because it's more stable. And what's stabilizing it is that sugar. Now, we can also increase the stability of an egg white foam by doing some things to it. We can add sugar, of course, that's the biggie. It helps slow the unfolding and aggregation of proteins and thickens the liquid film that surrounds the air bubbles. Be sure to add slowly. Add up to 2 times the weight of the egg white. So a typical Swiss meringue would be 2 parts sugar to 1 part egg white. So if you're making, let's say, 3 pounds altogether, you'd have 2 pounds of sugar and 1 pound of egg white. Use a clean bowl. Egg whites do not like fat. If there's even the smallest speck of egg yolk in that egg white, it could cause the entire mixture to collapse. So what happens here is lipids surround air bubbles in a foam, but they cannot form a film structure. The bubbles collapse. So any oils, now that could be on the bowl, it could be on the whip, it could be something that is some gook that's hanging from the underside of your mixer. Just make sure that everything you're working with is clean. It is free of any fats, any sort of contaminants. You can also use a little bit of acid. Now, cream of tartar is oftentimes added as an acid in order to help strengthen the protein and help it create a better, more stable egg foam. But you can also wipe the bowl down with lemon juice or lemon juice and water mixture. That will help to not only get rid of any grease or any oil that might be present, but it also will help to increase the strength of the protein. Now, we can't forget about salmonella. In America, we basically, as a safeguard, we think of all eggs as having salmonella on them. So all egg shells have some salmonella on them. And for some people, that means that they could get really deathly ill. Now, it causes a lot of problems. And if you've ever had salmonella, you know that it causes diarrhea, vomiting, fever, intense abdominal pain, and it usually lasts about 3 days. Once in a while, someone gets enough of it where they have to be hospitalized, but it's rare. It's most of the time just very uncomfortable and you're really miserable for about 3 days. But someone who has a compromised immune system, someone who's older or very young, like little children, like toddlers, could potentially have some serious medical condition if they consume anything with salmonella. So we have to treat it like a hazardous food. We have to make sure we're using gloves. We have to make sure we're using the best food safety practices we can. So when I get eggs in, I check the temperature of them. I evaluate 1 or 2 eggs for freshness. I just double check to see how they look. I refrigerate the eggs immediately and keep them refrigerated as much as I can. There are times when we want to let eggs sit out and warm up to room temperature to use them at room temperature. That's fine, as long as we're using them up and they're going to be baked. Refrigerate or freeze liquid egg products immediately, depending on the product. Unopened egg products can last for up to about 12 weeks, but once they're opened, you really kind of need to use them up in a few days. And discard any cracked eggs. If you ever see an egg that's cracked that's a shell egg, just throw it away. It's not worth it. You don't know how long it's been cracked and how much bacteria has found its way inside that egg. Don't wash eggs before use. Most likely you'll end up cracking a few and breaking a few. You're better off just using eggs carefully and following good food safety practices. Don't crack and pool eggs now for later use. What you're going to do is you're basically putting them in a position where hazardous food is available for bacteria. It's better to crack them almost immediately before use. And crack them off in a small bowl. Inspect for shell pieces before use. Don't crack eggs directly into a bowl of ingredients. If you get a shell in there, it's not only going to introduce the possibility of salmonella, but it's going to be hard to fish it out and hard to find it. And the person who's going to find it is the person eating whatever you're preparing. So don't allow the shell to come in contact with egg contents as much as you can. Try to reduce the chance of that as much as you possibly can. They think of salmonella as being on the outside of the egg. So the less contact, the better. Avoid cross-contamination. Sanitize your equipment, utensils, countertops after exposure to eggs. Wash your hands. Cook shell eggs for a minimum of 3.5 minutes at 140 degrees. Use pasteurized egg products when you're going to be using them uncooked. It's okay. The pasteurized egg products are guaranteed to have been pasteurized and eliminate any foodborne pathogens. And cool cooked products such as custard sauce quickly. Bring it on down. It's just like any time we're handling hazardous food. If it's going to be up at holding temperature, we want to bring it down to refrigeration temperature or at or below 40 within a reasonable amount of time. Usually that's within about 2 hours. If you're going to be thawing frozen egg products, thaw them in the refrigerator. Plan ahead. That's what I do. I buy egg whites and I put them in the refrigerator for a day or two before I'm going to use them. Dried eggs, we most likely won't come in contact with dry eggs, but when you do have them, they just need to be stored in a cool, dry place. They're generally shelf stable, and you reconstitute those with cool water and allow for the eggs time to hydrate before use. These are something that people used to talk about who were in the military back in the 1940s and 1950s. There were a lot of dried eggs being used because they were shelf stable. And they could handle the heat of the jungle. They could handle all kinds of different horrible environments and still be edible. So what are we going to do? We're going to go in the lab today and we're going to test out coagulation of eggs. We're going to be conducting an egg coagulation experiment where we're going to take straight eggs and we're going to heat them and we're going to track how long and at what temperature they start to coagulate. And then we're going to look at the beginning of coagulation, the midpoint, and the final coagulation temperature. To do this, you're going to use the induction burners in the lab, and we're going to set them to the Fahrenheit setting so that we can read the temperature that it's reading. Now, all of the induction burners are going to read slightly different temperatures. What you're going to document is what your induction burner reads. Don't worry about what other people's read. They may get a different reading. But what it's doing is it's trying to read the temperature of the pan that's on the glass on top of the induction burner. So crack 2 eggs for each experiment. You're going to be cracking straight eggs and then testing those for a beginning, midpoint, and final coagulation temperature. And then you're going to be testing eggs with sugar added. And I'll have an instruction sheet for you to tell you how much sugar to add. And then we're going to add eggs with baking soda. And we're going to look at the difference in how coagulation temperatures change when we add these other ingredients. After all, when you're baking something with eggs, you're not just baking eggs, but eggs are always mixed with something. And if you think about almost any baked product that has eggs in it, there's almost always sugar and there's almost always some baking soda in there. Baking soda or baking powder. But remember, baking powder is made with baking soda, so the baking soda is almost always in there. We could go further with this and test eggs with a number of other types of ingredients, like eggs beaten with some oil, for example, so for some fat, or with some flour mixed in, all kinds of different things. But we're just going to try sugar and baking soda today because we have limited amount of time in the lab. So I will see you tomorrow, and just when you come in, you're going to see non-stick saute pans available for everybody, and you'll find that I'll have the instruction sheets for you. And we'll conduct this experiment and document our results. Remember to wear your uniform and bring your masks.